In my strategy academy, there are only 2 books on strategy that I recommend to the students who are taking my course, Strategic Thinking for Advantage. These 2 books are books I've selected out of probably, at least the last time I looked, I've read about 512 books, according to Amazon. But these 2 books really stand out as being probably the 2 best books on strategy, in my opinion. And if you're going to read them in the order that I'm going to present them. I think they build off of each other in a nice way. And I think you'll get the most out of trying to understand what strategy is, what it's not, how you can go about formulating it, and how you can simplify it with a framework that comes in the second book. So let me introduce the first book, and I'll tell you a little bit about sort of the key idea in that book that really helped me a lot, and then I'll do the same with the second book. So this first book is called Good Strategy, Bad Strategy by a professor called Richard Rumelt. He's written another book that would be probably the third book on my list if I was going to recommend 3 books, called The Crux. But this is a great book to start with, and I recommend it to anybody and everybody who would like to become better at understanding strategy. First of all, it clarifies what strategy is, and perhaps more importantly, what it is not. And it helps really sort of understand that really well. And I think if you look on LinkedIn, you'll find people talking about what strategy is, what is not, myths about strategy. Many, if not all of them, really come from this book. All of that work comes from this book. It probably doesn't get the credit it deserves. The second thing that was very powerful for me was this idea of the kernel of good strategy. And Rumelt introduces this concept as being a way of thinking about kind of what are the elements of the strategy that you need to put together. So let me talk about what that means in a bit more depth. There are really 3 elements of the kernel. The first is what he calls the diagnosis. This would be, perhaps if you might call this the current state assessment. It's trying to understand what's going on. But in that diagnosis, you're trying to understand what is the key challenge that the organization is trying to overcome. What is the gap that it needs to close between where it is and where it wants to go? And really understanding the situation. A good strategy has a good diagnosis. In a sense, this is the idea that you should spend a lot of time on trying to just define the problem properly before you jump to a solution. The second element of the kernel is the guiding policy. And I've used this many times when I try and explain to people what strategy is, that strategy really is a guiding policy. And what you're really talking about here is a guiding policy that informs people as to how they should be deciding things. It empowers organizations to make choices on their own because they've got this policy that they can work within. And then the third is a set of coherent actions. And this is where you might get into thinking about what initiatives you might want to put into play, what capabilities you might need to put in existence to be able to execute on your strategy. But he describes that a good strategy has these 3 elements. These are really the kernel, and you can certainly build out more from this. But if you don't have these 3 basic fundamental building blocks at the heart of your strategy, it's going to be very difficult to be able to have a strategy that gets good traction or that people can understand. And this was a very powerful set of simple ideas that have informed me in my work in strategy. And it really sort of cuts down lots of the noise about what strategy is and what it isn't and how you might go about formulating a good strategy. So I highly recommend this book, Richard Rumelt's Good Strategy, Bad Strategy. Now, the next book is a book by a fellow named A.J. Lafley and another guy named Roger Martin. Lafley was the CEO of Procter & Gamble, one of the biggest consumer products companies in the world. Martin, at the time, I believe, was the dean of a business school and worked directly with Procter & Gamble on many of its strategy issues. And from that work together, they formulated this book. So it's a book that is sort of grounded in the reality of what it is to do strategy inside of a big company. And what they introduce in this book is the concept of strategy as choice. Strategy is choice. And I think what he is describing is when you make choices, you are, in a sense, exercising strategy or strategic thinking. And to a large extent, I believe he's correct, particularly when we make evaluative choices where we've actually consciously gone through and chosen a course or a path or a policy that we're going to follow going forward. And this fits nicely, I think, with the idea that in neuroscience, strategy is really described as policy selection, where a policy is a course of action or an ensemble of actions that you might take going forward. So essentially, this is the choices you are making that make a big difference in terms of how you execute action in the future. So this is a powerful idea that strategy is really about what choices you are making. And then they introduce a really nice framework to apply this idea of strategy as choice, and essentially it's a cascading set of choices that apply to business. And it's called the Playing to Win framework. And here is basically the questions you might use in this Playing to Win framework. It's a very simple framework that can really help you drill down into what are the answers to these questions, and to the extent you can answer these questions, you will be much farther along in terms of building an effective strategy. It starts off on the top left with what is our winning aspiration, what it is that we're trying to do. Then where will we play in the market? What customers are we going after? What geographies are we going after? What products are we going after? In the middle, we've got the how we will win. And sometimes these two go by play to win and how to win. And they maybe go by the acronym PTW and HTW, but you might see those acronyms in places, but that's what they're referring to. But this how will we win? What is it that makes us unique? What is our value proposition? How will we go about winning in the market? And this is nice because it really connects you to the question of competition. To be great, a strategy really needs to differentiate you from the rest of the players in the market. It needs to be a way of helping you become unique in a way that matters. It essentially brings you advantage. Then they drill down into what capabilities do I need that must be in place to be able to execute against that, and then what management systems are required. And I think this is a broad idea of management systems, management processes, management structure, management systems. What sort of infrastructure do I need to govern these choices going forward in the most effective manner? And you can follow this framework. I believe you'll find that you probably get to much better strategy decisions and you formulate strategy better. So if you couple Rumelt's work on the kernel and this play to win framework, it kind of gives you the tools you need to start building much better strategy. So I hope this has been helpful to you. If you like this video, I hope you will repost it and share it with other people. And I would check in the comments for a link to my course called The One Skill Every Executive Needs to Know. It's a free course you can take that will give you insights into how to think more strategically. And then if you want to go further, I have a full course on strategic thinking for advantage, which is available now. So I hope you check them out. My name is Alex Nesbitt. I am the founder of the Strategy Academy. Until next time, be enactive, be somebody who happens to the world.